back to Power and Purpose. Get ready for myself, Leon Mann, Will Troost-Ekong and Maro and Leon to take you on a leadership journey anchored in honesty and learnings. And today we're talking about when things don't go to plan and managing conflict. So two nice and easy subjects for us today, guys. But I wanted to start by basically getting your reflections on your podcast journey so far, because obviously this is all new to us. We haven't spoken over each other too much. The comments haven't been too bad. In fact, they've been pretty good. So, but how does it feel to you guys?
I think it's been really enjoyable, actually. I feel like you have to get used to speaking to an audience, so to speak, like from what seems like a private conversation, because obviously I only see you guys on the screen. It's been pretty smooth. We had some technical difficulties. I'll let Maro expand on that. But besides that, I think it's been good, and I feel like we're learning, and I hope people will understand that it's all part of the process. And when you put yourself out there and try something new, then it's inevitable that things won't always go right. But we'll talk about that more, I think, later in this podcast.
Maro, have you got your cable sorted?
So the nickname, guys. Apologies. The nickname that I seem to have been gotten now is Unk, because it seems like I'm the worst with all the technology. But I've enjoyed it. Whilst I'm battling some of these wires and some of the tech, which I still stand by is not my fault. But it's been good. I've been enjoying getting to know the two of you, and I'm excited for what's to come.
And an observation of mine is like your questions, for people who are used to answering questions and not asking questions in this sense, are like A1. Like seriously, I didn't have like low estimations of either of you. I had you in high regard, but your questions are on point. Like seriously, I'm seriously impressed. But how does it feel to be asking questions and not just on the other side of answering them in press conferences as you usually are?
I think it's we get our fair share of bad questions, so I think I try to use those and be like, okay, I'm not going to ask that. Of course, we had some practice, but it's like you said, it's different when you obviously flip the script and there's something as active listening, understanding what someone else is trying to portray, and unpacking that for the wider audience. So it's a skill. You're obviously very good at it, Leon. We're on my side. I'm still working on it. But it's also something quite fun, and it helps when you have interesting people to talk to.
I think it's also helpful that Will and myself, I think we're quite naturally inquisitive people. So often when I speak to someone off camera or off air, just a one-to-one conversation, I'm always asking questions. I'm always thinking about how they did that, how they were able to achieve this. So I guess this is just another forum where we can do all of those things.
Love it, guys. Love it. I think we're doing pretty well. Obviously, what we think is important, but what everyone who's listening and watching is more important. So hopefully we're living up to their expectations. And coming up now, we'll be talking about how we manage things when they go wrong. And actually, it's been interesting because for this recording, we've had a couple of challenges. So it feels like the universe has certainly tuned into this particular episode. But look, we're going to be really honest here, right? Things go wrong. And when things go wrong, as leaders, it's our job. We attempt as best as possible to remedy things, to put things right. Sometimes it goes well. Sometimes it doesn't go so well. But each time there's learnings, right? Or there should be. So let's jump into it. So, Will, I'm going to come to you first. I know you've been desperate to talk about when things go wrong. Let's just pick up organically. Like, can you tell us about when things haven't gone to plan?
Yeah.
How it's felt and how you've responded as a leader.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting topic because from what we see from my football world, sports world, which is obviously a job in the limelight, there's so much more that goes wrong than that goes right most of the time. I think we have to do well to obviously portray certain things. And of course you want to encourage and sometimes you have to put up a brave face because obviously you feel all kinds of emotions. So for me, the first thing when, that I've kind of had to learn, I had some help with this, whether it being with mentors or, mental coaches that I had, has been to kind of allow room for emotion. Sometimes that can be quite difficult because if you are a captain of the team, as Maro would know as well, after a game, maybe you have to go and face a press conference straight away, and you still have the adrenaline pumping through your body. I always find it interesting as well when you see press conferences post boxing, post fights, where you can see that sometimes someone is so worked up. Still, it's difficult to try and portray what they want to say. So, sometimes for us, there's one thing that you have to give to the fans, to the media, of taking accountability, ownership of the things that go wrong. And then I always allow myself to have some time to work through the emotions. So sometimes that takes longer than other moments, but it feels like a real come down and roller coaster. So, and then once that has passed, and I'll know that's passed because normally that will take about 24 hours, a sleepless night, still have your body and mind racing. And then it comes back to thinking in solutions. So I think there is so much to be said about accountability. And I think so often, in those moments, people will be looking at you for answers. So I think the first thing you have to do at the right time, that won't be in my field directly after the game in the change room, would be to take a moment to maybe have an honest conversation. So some examples of that has been, for example, we were in the championship at Watford. We had an amazing team. I think everyone was tipping us to be a team to get promoted that season. But we had a game away at Birmingham, which didn't go our way. And I think after the game, everyone knew that things weren't how they're supposed to be. And on the way home, so this was quite a quick process, I said, all right, let me try and call Tom Cleverley. I think it was Troy as well, some of the captains that we had in the team, to just be honest and say, I think, guys, that if we carry on this course, we're not going to achieve our goal of being promoted. So let's call a meeting tomorrow morning when everyone's in, after they had their breakfast, the recovery, so the first emotions are kind of flushed out, and let's talk about what we think is really happening and have that open floor, because I think there's also so much to be said that you don't always have to have the answer, and a lot of the times you probably don't feel like you have an answer. You might know what you could have done better, and I think the conversation, to be honest with each other, starts with that. So I remember opening the floor that day and explaining how I didn't think the training standards were right, the things that I wasn't doing myself, and very quickly after you kind of open up and you create a vulnerable environment, you see that other people will chip in. And making it very clear, sometimes people need to be prompted by asking them a question, what do you think? Because, you have a lot of different characters within the change room, some that are more outspoken, some of them that are more reserved. But you get some great answers from the people that don't talk a lot normally, because, they do well to observe a lot. And I think once you then have concluded and say, okay, guys, these are the things that we can change, and you give it a positive spin, you try to, be protagonist in that situation, to say, okay, this is what I've done wrong, feel free to be honest, but also, for people to have a chance to maybe say something to you or vice versa. And then you kind of feel like a weight drops off the shoulders, and you have a chance to then progress and work together towards what you want to achieve, because I think you need those moments for success to happen. It's almost like a trampoline effect. And I think, once you can understand that is a process that is part of a football season, or whether it's, starting a new business where you're going to inevitably have setbacks, or starting a podcast, there has to be that level of honesty. And that's the only way you can really iron out those things and create maybe some foresight of where you're heading and where you want to go to. And if those actions in the current moment don't align with what it looks like to be where you want to be, then that's where those changes have to be made. So I think there's always room for that. And in my experience, I think, the teams that are most honest and most open about that tend to be the most successful teams. Once you have that buy-in from everyone, like I said, you kind of lose that fear of failure, or maybe people protecting their own interests, because when you have a team setting, automatically it kind of feels like people are just trying to cover their own back. And once that is gone and you say, okay, well, guys, we're going to do this together and move forward, then straight away you can feel, there can be a positivity again and an optimism that you need, because otherwise if you have that fear of failure when you have your next fixture, for example, or your next meeting, or next time you're standing in front of a classroom or whatever your setting is, it's inevitable that you're going to be attracting those things. And if something does go wrong again, you end up in a negative spiral. So that has been kind of my experience, and I don't know how translatable that is to rugby or, Leon, what you do, but I feel like tends to be, the standard, and I think with that you can kind of set, a vision and then work towards that again.
Maro, how does that compare to your sport and your experiences?
Yeah, I would say very, very similar. I think I would almost break it down into two. So I would say there's like conflict and crisis in performance. Then there's conflict and crisis, I guess, away from the pitch, and often it's hard to separate them because often one leads to the other, so it's not as binary as that. But in performance, in a game, in a match, you really don't have too much time to think. You have to be decisive. You have to think quickly and act on that quite quickly as well. But yet also need to have buy-in, especially when things aren't going your way or where there's a matter that needs to be addressed. You probably have to be quite direct with that feedback. Whereas if it's something away from the pitch, perhaps you can be, maybe don't have to be as direct because of the performance. Whilst the performance is depending on it, is not depending on it imminently, so you have a little bit more time. And I guess I've been in a few quote unquote crisis meetings. They're always they're always a little bit funny in hindsight. At the time, it's terrible. I remember once we in the 2023 World Cup, we lost to Fiji at Twickenham, which it was a really bad day for us. We didn't play well, really disjointed. Then we ended up going to where were we? We were actually in France for the World Cup at the time. We went out a week before to just get settled into the environment. Then we had like a senior players meeting, and it was pretty harsh, pretty brutal. But as a result of that, we finally got aligned, and that's I think that's what you want. That's what you want to get out of times of conflict. You want to get aligned. You want to get on the same page, because often when things aren't going well or aren't going according to plan, there's some misalignment somewhere. There's people think this and some people think that. For all teams, you want to be rowing in the same direction, and when you have people doing different things, it becomes very difficult.
I think just to add to that, I think what Maro says, if I look at it from my personal perspective, a lot of times you don't feel like you have the answer, or you might be the individual that's made a mistake. But I think there's almost something to be said about being brave in that moment. And, a lot of the times it feels really unnatural to come in and maybe be the person who opens up that conversation, or maybe be the person that comes in with high energy or positiveness to kind of ignite something again in the team, because you feel like you also want to hide and sulk. But I think those are the things that you kind of have to put your mind past. So I think there's something to be said almost about faking it till you make it, to a certain extent, because of course you have to be, come across honest and trustworthy, but you might know what the right thing is to do at that moment, but you don't feel like doing it. However, you need to take that first step, because that will probably get the next person, and then it's like a domino effect. And then when you need to lean on someone else, you kind of have that support as well. So I think there's something to be said about trying to break a cycle. But yeah, during a game, like Maro says, or maybe when you're in a heated meeting or whatever, you have to make decisions quickly, which is always a very difficult thing. And for me, there has to be a room for people to make mistakes, because otherwise they can't try to really exploit their potential. But there's a difference between making an honest mistake. So In football terms, if you are, tracking back with someone and someone ends up getting just a stretch and scores a goal against you, for example, that is something that can be accepted in an environment where you have to say, okay, that moment someone might have got the better of you because, sports often is a game of mistakes, and who makes the least tends to win. However, they do happen in every moment. But then there's other things about someone deciding that, they don't want to track back in that moment, or maybe being lazy. And I think those are the mistakes that become unacceptable. And I think you have to do very well to separate those two things and then create standards. And I think that goes on and off the pitch, like Maro mentioned, because I think they are related to a certain extent. And I think maybe to get people to understand responsibility, that starts with things that can be controlled, as simple as timekeeping or how people apply themselves, because those are the things that automatically create, a certain standard that then, will translate to when those quick decisions have to be made. And then everyone says, okay, we're going to do it the right way because we've been doing it every day, day in, day out. So, that's just the only thing I wanted to add to Maro, because I can really relate with what he says. And it does always feel a bit funny when you think back at those meetings. But yeah, they seem to, a lot of the times, be the reason why you can turn things around and kind of like close one chapter and close a feeling, and then, go on to the next thing where you can, have a positive run again.
You've both talked to the same theme, and Maro's said it in terms of saying, get buy-in. So whatever world you're in, so whoever you are listening to this, if you are a leader and you need to change something, whether it's in sport, business, wherever it is, you need to get buy-in. But get buy-in, 3 simple words, an incredibly difficult thing to do when things are wrong and people are feeling down. So are there things you saw in what you did yourselves in those situations, or contributed in those situations, that helped you get that buy-in that our listeners could connect with?
I think a few things here. I think in order to get buy-in, there's a degree of honesty that is needed, because often you're working with clever people. You're working with people who can see through all the rubbish that one may be talking about. So you need to be honest and humble enough to, one, accurately dissect the issue, but then be humble enough, if it's you who's making the mistake or whatever the remedy is, we need to be humble enough to take it on board and communicate that effectively to the team. And the other thing also is not necessarily about one person coming up with all the ideas. I think sometimes as leaders, you feel the pressure to, oh, okay, I'm in this leadership position, I have to solve the problem. I have to come up with a smart idea. It's not. It need not be you all the time. It may be you. It might be you some of the times, but it's. I often feel that often puts pressure on you. I think these things can be collaborative. I think these things you can lean on the smart people that you have around you, or you can lean on the intelligent people that's in the circle. And even if you don't think someone's intelligent, sometimes they're the ones who give you the best gems. I've had that numerous times, more times than I can count. There's always that person who never speaks, who never contributes, and just has that one thing to say. Then you're like, wow, I wish we need you to speak more. We need you to contribute more. So there's a lot in there.
Yeah, and I had a great mental coach. His name is Joost, and he worked with numerous different football players. So I started working with him together in 2017, when I was leading up to the year we had the World Cup 2018. And I felt I was going to a new environment. I just moved to Turkey, playing in front of a big crowd week in, week out. And I felt like this was such an important year for me, that I almost wanted to do that out of precaution, because I knew it would be a lot of years of ups and downs. And as I worked with him and I kind of grew older and my role kind of changed, where I became, a captain in the team, the first thing he said to me is, you have to use your emotional intelligence. And I think this is adding to what Maro's point is about identifying who else has influence on the group. And sometimes also when you want to talk with people in a senior position, whether that's your coach or your boss, that there is so much more to be said for picking the right people to come with you if you have a suggestion for what the whole group might want to change, or what can actually be constructive in that environment. Or, if you want to speak to a group, like Maro said, people get very tired of hearing the same voice all the time sometimes. So you need to make sure that you choose the right people around you, where it could be, you can arrange a situation where another person can speak up and actually give their mind. And I think if you keep that dynamic where it's more than one person, you kind of have different ideas. So sometimes there's also a way to fact check yourself and to see if you're really doing the right thing for everyone. But there's so much said, where some of the brilliant ideas that I've seen as well, like Maro said, comes from people that don't say a lot, or you might not expect it from. But yeah, they all have the same interests, and of course everyone wants to do well, and you need to create an environment where a team or a group or a company works together for everyone to reach the heights that they want to achieve. Because I think if you don't have that underlying power of everyone's working together, then you will never be able to reach your personal goals. So I think there's such a key point that Maro just touched on.
Yeah, and I often think with these things also, no one could do it by themselves. No one can achieve all these things by themselves. So what's the point of even trying?
Yeah.
What's the point of even trying? And I guess Will and myself, we come from it perhaps from a sporting point of view, whereas you come from it from a business/broadcasting point of view. What have been your experiences in this field?
It's really interesting listening to both of you, because trying to translate it into the worlds that I am within, and there's lots of different worlds. So I have a commercial business as a consultancy. I have not-for-profit work that I do with the Football Blacklist, and BComs, which is about diversifying the sports media. And obviously, as a broadcaster, I've been in those elite sporting environments with a microphone, and I've seen a lot of, you said, Will, allowing emotion. I think some of those managers I interviewed after games allowed a little bit too emotion at times, borderline bullying, and we see it on Sky Sports and BBC and everywhere post games. And I'm surprised the managers don't go and have a breather before coming and speaking to the media. I know that there will be kind of contractual commitments for people when they're coming to do post-game interviews, whether that's in rugby or football. But sometimes those managers, captains, full of emotion, are not managing that emotion particularly well in terms of how they're communicating, because how they're communicating sometimes, they're not actually saying what they want to say. They're just responding and reacting to a situation as they feel. So they haven't let the emotion kind of settle yet. And the best managers, Arsene Wenger, you'd have to wait for him for ages, because Arsene Wenger would come out of the game, go into the dressing room, and you as an interviewer at the end, you as a broadcaster, would have to wait because he's calming himself down. Whereas some of the younger managers were just wanting to get it done quickly so they can get back into the dressing room. So they come to you straight away with loads of emotion. And it's not necessarily younger managers, because I've had run-ins with some of the older managers, shall we say, where they were really struggling to control some of their emotions.
So give us an example.
Well, I don't want to go into it too much because I don't want to call too many names here. But and if I give you the example, yeah, it's an honest place, but we all make mistakes, right? We all make mistakes, and I wouldn't want to call anyone out. But there was, I can't even say who the manager, because they haven't had that many managers. It was a national team manager, and this national team manager, before a game, did an interview with me, and I had the teams. And I looked at the formation and looked at the player who was going to play number 9. And there'd been a debate all week who's going to play number 9. So, you don't need to know football very well to know that one player is playing out of position, one player is playing number 9. So I said, it's interesting that you've gone for this player in the number 9. He goes, well, how do you know what formation I'm playing today? and went really spiky with me. And thankfully, they went back to the studio, and one of the pundits kind of saved me in many ways, because he said, "Ooh, he's a bit touchy today, isn't he?" So actually, that kind of like gave my questioning and my line of questioning some credibility from someone who's a very, very well known pro. But this person was just particularly sensitive all the time. And they were doing pretty well from what I could see, but they had a relationship with the press that was difficult and tricky. And for me, managing that at the time, because you don't want to be. I think interviewers now are a lot more like it's they've got a lot more confidence to take on managers, whereas I think in the past we kind of were quite passive. And actually, I felt I was quite passive in my style, because I was like, it's not about me. This is about getting the best information from the person I'm speaking to. It's not about the drama of a back and forth. Although actually, on reflection, that back and forth maybe would have got me better information. And that's why I think a lot of the guys doing the job are doing it very well at the moment. But again, speaking to the theme here, like there's broadcasting and then there's the workplace. And I think we're less intentional than what you're talking about in sport. I think some of these big corporations will send you on a course about being more intentional and about creating workplaces. But actually, the reality can be they're quite hierarchical. And actually, as a result of that, we miss the views, particularly of younger people, particularly of people who are from underrepresented backgrounds, maybe, because we have environments that are kind of built and their foundations are around, a hierarchy and an establishment. That means when the big boss speaks, everybody listens and does. And actually, I think that's unhealthy. And a lot of the work I do with leaders is kind of talk about that. And I can talk to some of the successes that my very small business has had have been down to one of the younger members of the team saying, what about this?
So how do you do that, Leon? How do you create that environment in your business then, where you say, okay, I'll try to learn from that or maybe change direction? Or would you have a regular meeting with them to ask them for any tips or what they think should be done different?
I think you both touched on it in terms of emotional intelligence. And a lot of people think they have emotional intelligence or high emotional intelligence, and often they don't. And I think sometimes when you're leading a business, and perhaps maybe more so of a small business or a very large business as well, equally, I guess, you can just get wrapped up in what you're doing next, as opposed to what everybody's contributing to. Are you leading people, or are you kind of all moving forward together? And I think it takes an openness to do that, because you remain accountable, but you set the direction of travel based on like the people around you and what you ultimately have to deliver. And I don't think that's an easy thing for some people, because you can feel a loss of control. I think the things that we're talking about here, it feels like through sport, it feels like you're more intentional.
It's probably could be applied more, across different businesses. So my question to both of you is really, so for someone who isn't that emotionally intelligent, how is that something that you acquire, or how is that something that you can potentially train to kind of get a better direction or better feel about moments and when to intervene?
So just going back a step, let's come back to that question in a second. But it just got me thinking. So within sport, we essentially have a performance review every week. Your work, your actions are reviewed on a weekly basis, and the ultimate score is whether you win or lose. But as we all know, there's loads of things that lead into a performance. So to your point, Leon, I think there's an urgency to get things right quickly, because you can't really afford to have 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row where either you get a bad performance or your own individual performance is not well. Because first of all, if your own individual performance isn't up to scratch, it's likely you're going to get dropped and someone else can go there. Then, as a collective, if the team performance isn't doing well, then the team is suffering. There's pressure on the boss. There's pressure on the whole staff, players, etc. So there's a collective urgency to get things right. Whereas within business, what I imagine is that because how they review performance isn't necessarily as frequent as that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the business, right, Maro? I mean, for many business, it's just straight up a spreadsheet. What does the spreadsheet tell me about this moment in time? Are we making money? Are we making more money? Why aren't we making more money? And then I think, unless there's an understanding about all the components of a business that need to work well or work better to achieving that goal, then it can just be, well, that person's not selling, that person's not doing this, get rid. As opposed to having a culture where you genuinely get the best from people and identifying what the best is. Because I think sometimes in business, the people who get to the top aren't the best leaders, but they might be the best performers. And I think that's an interesting debate in itself, whether that's sport or business. So if you're the best performer, does that mean you're the best person to lead a group? You might not have that skill set, but you might be the person who just performs particularly well in the thing that you're very good at, and that's valued by the business or valued by the team. And I think it's that understanding about all those different things in the world that's around us, because I believe context always gets lost in a lot of these discussions and debates and a lot of decisions around businesses. I'm forever being asked, what do you think young people are thinking? And I was like, well, I might be one of the younger people in the room, but I'm certainly not young. So if we want to know what young people are thinking, we need to listen to young people directly, and allow young people to lead, which is very scary for some of these bosses. They're thinking, well, I had to work X amount of years to get into a position to lead. But actually, if we're talking about selling to young people, as we often are, then actually maybe listening to young people and empowering young people in a different way might be the best form of leadership that you can kind of put in place. I think it's a moving feast, but it's something that I don't think that I think we could do better. Ultimately, I think we could do it a lot better, basically.
Yeah, so just to come back on that and touch on what you mentioned, Leon, about having people that have that emotional intelligence to understand those situations and guide that. How is that something that you can improve? And if you're listening to this, you say, I want to be more emotional intelligent. Is that something that comes with experience? And how is that something that you can challenge yourself to improve, really?
Oof. Jesus, that's a question and a half, Will. That really is a cracker there, mate. That's stumped me slightly, because, like, genuinely, and look, I'm not going to just try and give people leadership chat here, right? This is kind of just what I have experienced and what I think. In my life, in my world, I meet lots of people with lots of different skills, and they might be incredibly good at lots of things, but often, a lot of the time, it ain't emotional intelligence in my view and opinion. It might be they're exceptional, like I say, at certain things, but that ability to actually stop and listen and understand and sense and know when to ask the question, when to maybe hold off it, I just think that's such a skill. And I'm not saying not many people have it. I think that would be harsh to say that, but I don't feel it as much as I would like to feel. I think sometimes people are busy making mistakes, and that's okay, right? Because that's how we learn. But the important part is, are you learning, or are you doing that same thing where you're not feeling out the thing that people have kind of said to you and given you feedback on? Maybe you should be more aware of your surroundings and environment to help us. And then they keep doing the same thing, and that's a lack of emotional intelligence a lot of the time.
Okay.
How do you change that? You've got to be one hell of a leader to turn that round, I think. Okay. Of course it's possible. But in my experience, and I'd love to know in a sporting context and what you both think, but in my experience, you can coach people, you can bring them on a journey, they can get better and better and better at things, but then you also find people who just aren't ready. They're just not ready at that point in time when you need them to be. and then you kind of need to have a different approach with them.
So does that come down to being coachable and winning information and maybe self-awareness?
Self-awareness, 100%. And look, I've said it on this podcast. I think the first podcast. It's certainly something I've had to go on a journey with, because when you have such a sense of conviction, and it all comes from this good place, I hope, in myself, and with others, then you can really get blinkers on. And sometimes that can get you to an incredible place, right? But it's hard to get you to a place as part of a group. It's hard to go together when you've got two people with blinkers on who are just not interested really in what the rest of the world's telling them, because they're so convinced that what they're doing is in the right way. So for me, I think it's just about a point in time when people are ready to be coached. And I think it comes down to what people have experienced a lot personally in their lives. And we've kind of talked on this podcast about our own personal journeys and things that have kind of influenced and impacted us on the way. And I think people feel different things at different points in their journey and are ready to listen or not to listen, based on all of those things. And that's just humanity. And how we work with those people as leaders, really can test your leadership. But that's the interesting part of leadership as well, right? We all like a challenge, and there's nothing better than seeing someone who maybe is struggling with something move to a place where they're maybe asking questions, being more curious. Maybe they're kind of slowing down on just making actions without checking in with the team to make sure that all kind of fits together for what we're trying to achieve. So I'd hate to think that anybody is uncoachable, but I've got to be really honest in saying I've met a lot of people in my working life who I just think, I ain't got the time for that.
Yeah.
Unless I have to, unless I absolutely I need them. I need what they. But there's some people who, if I don't have to work with them, then as a small business, I can choose who I work with. I can go to a different supplier, a different individual, and there's only so much time you can spend as a small business, because you will disappear if you don't make decisions at critical times.
So how do you see that, Maro, in the sporting environment? Because I feel like, something that I've kind of seen is, like you said, is everything is a lot quicker, and good and bad gets revealed instantly, maybe on a daily basis. So how do you see that? In the sporting environment, how could you train your emotional intelligence?
Again, it's a bit of a tough one. I think, generally speaking, you need to be compassionate. If you're compassionate with how you speak, and if you're able to sympathize with another person and understand perhaps what they're going through and some of the challenges they may face, then I think that goes a long way in trying to grow your emotional intelligence. I think it comes with experience as well. It comes with saying something and realizing that, oh, that didn't go down too well. Oh, maybe I should have said this. Or maybe I should have put it like that. But again, I would draw a distinction between on the pitch and off the pitch. Like on the pitch, in the successful teams and environments I've been in, they've been incredibly direct on the pitch, because on the pitch there's no time to fluff your words. There's no time to skirt around the issue. We need to solve the problem. We need to solve it quickly. So it's incredibly direct. And if someone was listening to the conversation, they'll be like, "Oh, that's a bit harsh. Oh, he said it in a way that was quite confrontational." But really, in my view, that's what is required on the pitch. However, that has to be backed up with a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve, and an understanding that whatever is said on the pitch is not personal. It's about how we grow as a team and how we reach our goal. And I think, and again, that comes from relationship building, that comes from care with one another. So the more and more one can foster that sort of environment where you can speak directly, but no, that's on the back of actual care. I think that will go a long way into building some EQ.
Okay. Yeah, because for me, my experience with that has been that in the teams that I've been in, the first thing is obviously relationships. So what you, like you said, off the pitch, how you connect with someone. And that's, in my opinion, starts with winning information. So can you relate to the person? Do you understand what moment in their life they're in? Leon, like you mentioned, is it something that they are very blinkered, but that might be their power as well? Football has showed that to me, where we have had players where they're so convicted, they have so much self-conviction, about who they are and what they can achieve, to sometimes it almost sounds a bit delirious. However, that is also their superpower, and actually makes them try things which then every so often come off and maybe put them in an extraordinary bracket. But then there's, like you said, there's also other people that might be going through a difficult time. And how I've seen that is that in my experience, you have to kind of understand the people where they are, how they like to be spoken to. And I think my journey of trying to improve my emotional intelligence in my workplace has been very much on that, knowing how you can coach people, but at the same time, being coachable. Because I feel like if you are in a situation where you always want to get everyone in the same direction, however, you don't want to listen to what anyone else is saying, then sometimes you have to take a good look at yourself and see how that might be received, and if people would be more open to receive what you're saying if you also listen to what they have to say. And I think, like you said, on the pitch, that can be very direct, because like Maro said, often there's no time to say anything, and you often want to fix a small problem before it becomes something big or something that can't be reversed. But that also comes from being able to hear it from other people. So there's been a lot of times where, I've also been very strong-willed and maybe wanted to say something, and then in the heat of the emotion, if I find it difficult to hear it from my teammates when I do something wrong, and then, sometimes I have to have a chuckle with myself and say, why can you not accept that from someone else? But it's also been a journey of being, thinking, okay, what I'm doing is the only thing that's right, and maybe also opening up and understanding that if someone is doing it from a place where they're trying to achieve the same goal, their question to you or their direction can be just as right as well. So that was just my take on that. But it's really interesting to hear, because I think it's something that comes with experience, and something that I think we're all learning and improving. But the best people that I have seen doing it, they've had a real humble approach, and also been very inquisitive to understand the people that they're working with. Because I think if you can't cross that line and get to know someone in a relationship, whether they like to talk, whether they not like to talk, if they need an arm around them, or if they need a good shouting to, then you can't apply the right thing to try and help everyone move forward. So I think it's really interesting, and I'm sure people listening to this, they'll have their own take on it, and I'd love to hear what their experience has been, because I feel like there's something that can be learned on a daily basis on how to approach people, and also how you can get people all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, I'm going to drop a little sporting story, right? And it's a bit weird doing it with you two, because obviously I'm going to talk about Hackney Marshes right now. And, have either of you played on Hackney Marshes at all in your lives?
I've never.
Unfortunately,
No?
not.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, you can have Twickenham, and you can have kind of like the international world stage of football and World Cups, AFCONs, etc. But I'm gonna go there with Hackney Marshes, because as you're talking, I'm recalling an experience I had as a 16-year-old playing on Hackney Marshes, and in the team there was a Rastafarian guy, like he was like roots and culture, good vibes all the way. He was about 42 and I was 16. And we're in the dressing room, and he goes, right, everyone, listen. And he goes, anything I say to you on that pitch, it's never personal. Just understand that now. And I was a 16-year-old. I was just like, what's he talking about? On the pitch, wow. Like, honestly, you had to be on it, or else you were getting it from him straight. Now, the thing is, I accepted it, and I actually liked it, because a 16-year-old, this guy's 42. He's in the shape of his life. He's looked amazing and just was like probably the best player on the pitch. But the respect I had for him because of the way he did that, and because when we stepped out of that dressing room, when we were off the pitch, arm round you, how's college going? How's school going? He really took an interest. So you could feel the difference and you could understand the energy. And I think it's that thing, understanding energy, which is something that I learned from that guy. I've never seen him again in my life, right? Just played for a season with this guy and he just disappeared, and then we all go off on our different
Hopefully he's listening today.
I hope so. If you are, reach out, because I owe you a drink for that lesson, because I have taken that experience, and I hope, through the work I've done with BComs, Football Blacklist, within my own businesses, always looked out for younger people. It feels like the right thing to do. And also, I learn so much from younger people. I learn so much. If I want to stay relevant in this world, I need to know what these younger generations are thinking and doing to ensure that I'm relevant when I walk the street and I look around at the world I'm within, in the same way when I'm speaking to the elders. So this man, and I haven't got his name, and that's bad, but it was a long, long time ago. I'm talking 96, 97 right now. So I know that's going to blow you guys' minds. Yeah. But as a little 16-year-old with my little dreads and stuff, he was the full Rastafarian giving me the teachings. But actually taking that into your workplace, taking that everywhere, I think the same can apply in terms of, look, we need to be sharp and focused when we're kind of delivering a mission and delivering a piece of work. However, this is work, and actually the bigger, more important thing is life and our relationship around that. And I think that kind of generates an environment where we can all kind of, as you say, row in the same direction. So that's my sporting story for you. I promise I won't impart too many, because it feels a bit strange, quite frankly.
But it's really nice to hear, because I think he's obviously showed that when you meet someone, there's also a way to get a shortcut to maybe having that understanding of someone, because obviously if you haven't got a chance to build up a relationship with someone directly, by making such statement, like you said, everyone will now understand this is the place where it's coming from, so there wouldn't be any debate. So I think, if you come into a new environment, that could be a great way of putting that, because I think, you can also be as direct as saying, this is my intention with what I'm about to say. And then people will be more open to it. And like you said, you never know how you can impact someone's life when you meet them for the first time on Hackney Marshes,
Okay, guys, well, that's the end of the podcast for this week. And to everyone listening, we really hope we're hitting, the right notes for you. And if not, we can take it. We've been talking about managing bad situations and conflicts. So let us know, but be nice in the comments. But let us know what you want to hear more from us on. Let us know what's really kind of making this podcast a standout for you. Because ultimately your feedback will guide us in the direction of making this absolutely relevant for our community. So we're now in a place where we're ready to start introducing guests to the podcast. We've been on the phone, on WhatsApp, sending facts. We've been at it all to some incredibly talented and brilliant leaders. So we're looking forward to introducing them to the podcast very shortly. Keep an eye on our social channels for information on who they will be and when they will be appearing. Also, let us know. I know we've been on our socials asking you who you'd like to see on Power and Purpose. So keep all of those ideas coming. We're really, really interested in understanding who should be talking to us and talking to you about leadership with power and purpose. So I'll end with one final call. Please do get subscribing, sharing about power and purpose. We see every single post and comment, and we appreciate you all. See you next time, and take care.